the shame stupidity of Khamenei and his regime, who thinks he can kill his way out of this. You cannot kill your way out of this. That Khamenei is an arrogant, dogmatic, self-righteous, insecure murderer.
Iran is living through one of the darkest chapters in its modern history. Tens of thousands of Iranians have been massacred in a crackdown that survivors described as systematic, deliberate, and executed with chilling precision, not only on the streets, but inside prisons, inside hospitals, and increasingly in silence. And yet, even as the killings continue, the Islamic Republic is doing what it always has done: lying. We are watching an information war unfold in real time as officials downplay the death toll, calling protesters rioters and blaming this national uprising on the Mossad and the CIA. Today, we begin with historian and Iran scholar Professor Abbas Milani to place this massacre in historical context and to explain how mass repression is executed from the very top of the Islamic Republic.
I am very grieved and profoundly saddened by the realities of today. Gramsci famously said, I am depressed in my heart, but I'm optimistic in my brain.
At this very moment, diplomats are preparing for talks, raising a profound moral question. What does diplomacy even mean when the regime is carrying out mass murder? We will discuss these negotiations with Major Andrew Fox, a conflict researcher and senior fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, and Jake Wallis-Simons, foreign correspondent, columnist, and author of Never Again: How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself.
That the regime is too fanatical to give up its nuclear ambitions. It really, its whole reason for existence is this millenarian, apocalyptic 313 fighters kind of Mahdi theology.
Whatever happens. So Mr. Trump has created a situation where he has to do something, and he probably will.
And in one of the most shocking developments yet, doctors are now being arrested, abducted, killed, and in some cases reportedly facing execution simply for treating wounded protesters. We will be joined by Dr. Homa Fati and Dr. Pantea Rezayan of the AIDA Health Alliance, a coalition of diaspora physicians documenting the targeting of medical professionals inside Iran.
In one case, there were 5 snipers put on top of a hospital to shoot the injured as they approached the hospitals.
Tortured and beaten to death, and many other doctors.
I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Professor Abbas Milani, it's always an honor to speak with you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure, as always.
Give us the historical perspective first. How unprecedented is this massacre in Iran's modern history?
I think it's unprecedented in terms of the number of people who have been killed, number of people who have been injured. I still don't think the regime has outdone its number of arrested, because in the women life liberty movement, they arrested upward of 100,000. I don't have the most recent numbers, but this is the most murderous this regime has been. I think the last time such numbers were in the play in terms of the number of people killed must have been during Agha Mohammad Khan Qajar, when he did Kerman, and it has lived in infamy. I have no doubt in my mind that this is Khamenei's day of infamy. And with it, he not only made himself eternally infamous, but I think he made it the great shame for the regime that he serves, for the religion that he claims to represent. And he also made it, I think, a great day of infamy for all the people in diaspora and in Iran who have worked and continue to work assiduously to hide this, or to underplay it, or to reduce the numbers, or to blame others other than Khamenei and his regime for this calamity. It's a sad day, but it's also, to me, there's another side to this. Last night we had a program on our campus. This was a report of a 2-year project of research very detailed, granular research on the number of demonstrations in Iran from 2009 to 2024. In Tehran, which is the focus of their study, there were over 3,000.
Wow.
3,000. They went through very methodically. They're going to present their paper, publish their paper. They presented it last night. We're going to put it online.
Look forward to reading it.
It is remarkable. I think you should talk to
yes.
The people who authored it. There are 3 people who worked on it, remarkable scholars, with meticulous care to not include a single demonstration that cannot be credibly verified. Sometimes taking cameras from space, sometimes taking images from the demonstration, going through granularly, counting the numbers, counting the slogans. So that's the hopeful sign, that this has gone incessantly for 25 years. I think for 40 years, but they have studied it for 25 years. And it's going to go on. And it's the shame, stupidity of Khamenei and his regime, who thinks he can kill his way out of this. You cannot kill your way out of this. You've now killed several thousand. Next time you'll have to kill several tens of thousands, because the discontent, the anger, the grief, the resentment, the hatred of your arrogance and your incompetence only accumulates.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody inside Iran, and they were telling me that it's not about, for them at least, it's not about, what he said was, it is not about hope anymore. That hope is irrelevant. He said, this regime must go, and there is no other option. I don't hope for something. This will happen, and we are determined.
That's a message I have repeatedly heard in the last 2 weeks, every time there has been a chance to talk to someone inside Iran and a chance to talk to someone outside Iran who is not polluted by the regime's ideologies, or who's not an agent or a peddler of this regime. Everyone else is in the same state that exactly you described, that this is just beyond the acceptable. And this group has to go. Iran needs a better tomorrow.
And not just that, I feel that none of us will ever be the same again after this massacre.
I think that's true. I absolutely, I am not the same. My students are not the same. My friends are not the same. The friends that I have here. There are people who pretend this hasn't happened, but they don't remain friends of anybody who has an iota of decency in them. I think this is going to separate many paths. It is not something that you can say, okay, maybe they don't understand it. Maybe there's some angle we don't understand. This makes it all very clear where everybody stands, whether their hand is in the blood or their hand is in the effort to get the bloodthirsty rulers out of Iran.
Yeah, it's something we will never forget, too. Speaking of which, these negotiations that are apparently set for Friday, at this point, what is there even to negotiate about? And when, in order to have a successful revolution, one of the conditions is a favorable international environment. And a lot of Iranians thought that they had that with the red line that President Trump had. Now we have this set to happen on Friday. What message does that send to Iran's opposition and to Iranians inside and outside Iran?
First of all, the message I hope it sends is that we should not rely on any foreign government. Foreign governments pursue their own interests. Foreign governments are greedy. Foreign governments are unreliable. And to base all your hope on a foreign government, I think, was folly. Second of all, I think Mr. Trump is very unpredictable. By Friday, we might have the beginnings of an agreement with the Iranian regime, or we might have the beginnings of a war. Nobody knows. I don't know. Some people might know, I don't know. But to go back to the first part of your question, I am bewildered exactly as you are about why do you want to have this negotiation, particularly after what the regime has said. The U.S. has said they need to stop enrichment completely. They need to stop supporting their proxies, and they need to limit their ballistic missiles, at least in terms of numbers and in terms of the amount of miles they can travel. The Iranian regime has said none of these are acceptable. At least publicly, that's what they have said. The French foreign minister has said negotiations should also include a regime change. It should also include human rights. Let's forget about the French says. Iran is on record saying we don't accept these three. So what are you negotiating for? What are you hoping to achieve? Iran says we are only willing to negotiate on saying we won't build a bomb. Well, you have lied for 40 years. You have said we don't want to build the bomb, and then your foreign minister, the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Agency, the past head of atomic energy, Khamenei, everybody has said we know how to build it in 24 hours. Well, if anybody has studied even for a minute what it takes to build a bomb, nuclear bomb, you clearly have done everything to build the bomb. So you've been lying when you said our purpose is peaceful. What is Khamenei going to promise Mr. Trump that is going to be reliable? So I don't understand it. But I also never from the beginning thought that we know for sure what he's going to do. Every interview I did, when they asked me, I said, I don't know what he's going to do. I never have thought, I still don't think, that the solution to Iran's problem is an invasion. I think the solution to Iran's problem is domestic. Iranian people are capable of getting rid of this regime. They don't need Donald Trump's cavalry to arrive. But we also don't need false promises. Yes. And we also don't need you to throw a lifeline to this regime just as it's about to sink. Making a promise, not delivering, and then negotiating what clearly is to me a futile negotiation. Even if there is an agreement, 6 months later, you're going to be back in the same place you are now because this regime is a cheating, unreliable regime. Why are you doing this? I don't understand it.
I certainly don't understand it either. And we've learned that the Islamic Republic and the IRGC have been planning for a crackdown of this magnitude for nearly 2 decades now. I mean, they expected that a day like this would come. What does that tell you about the system and how it functions?
It tells me it is a murderous regime that has realized that it's incapable of correcting itself. It tells me that it's a murderous regime that recognizes that the great majority of the Iranian people don't want it. And it's a murderous regime that thinks falsely that it can murder its way out of this impasse. It can't. Again, 2 years ago, I was in a conference at Harvard where somebody said that in one of the attacks in I think in Syria or somewhere, they had access, the Israelis had access to a directive from the IRGC about domestic security. And exactly what you said, they were planning for a major crackdown. They said, we have to have a major crackdown when we think that there is a chance of an outside conflict. We need to shut down, we need to kill the people, we need to oppress the people, lest they be tempted to attempt an overthrow. So it's a regime that operates on fear. It's a regime that survives on fear. And both the last round of demonstrations, and I think even before that, the woman life freedom movement, showed that Iranian people are no longer afraid of these murderers. To have stopped the demonstration doesn't mean they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a mad person and you know that this is a mad person and you try to cover and find the right occasion to get rid of them, you aren't afraid of them. You're wise.
Yes.
To go out in the street where you have these criminals led by a criminal who says all of these people are ISIS. You, Mr. Khamenei, are a clone of ISIS. The Iranian people aren't. Shame on you if there are several tens of thousands of spies in Iran, Israeli spies. You claim they killed only spies. Shame on you that having 44 years of power and all of this money, you still have a society that if there is a free election tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to get 5% of the vote. The maximum is, if Goman is to be believed, 10% want this. And I think that 10% was before this calamity.
Yes.
I think I have talked to people who tell me remarkable stories about towns, small towns, where members of the Basij have now gone into hiding.
Yeah.
Because they know, the neighbors know, that they were involved in this killing. That's the first step towards cracks in the oppressive apparatus. So that's what it tells me, that Khamenei is an arrogant, dogmatic, self-righteous, insecure murderer.
And when Khamenei makes this decision at the top with the IRGC and they decide on something like this, give me kind of like a TikTok on the chain of command. Who receives the order first, and how does this go through the IRGC, the intelligence security, and how do they coordinate a massacre on this scale?
Well, I don't know the exact details. I don't claim to know the exact details, but clearly they had planned it. Clearly they had troops that they could trust. Clearly, when Khamenei changed the second in command of the IRGC and brought this new guy who was a long history of butchery, was already putting in place the command structure that he could rely on. He brought him, and then they made other command changes. But this is the kind of thing that only can happen one or two times. You can't get away with this. Again, you know, if you look at the history of demonstrations in Iran, it has been incessant, and it has increased in the potency of the opposition and the murderous nature of the suppression. That's going to stop, where people are going to, at one time, decide, maybe if we all come out in the streets in the same day, these people can't kill. Or a more likely or equally likely scenario is that some people in the IRGC and the Basij say, why should we kill for this old guy and lose our privileges? Let's get rid of him and make peace with the opposition. Let's make peace with the Americans and keep what we have ourselves. I mean, remember, the IRGC is no longer an ideological group. It's a mafia corporation. And mafia dons want to keep their turf. They want to keep their money. And if they think they have someone who has lost his marble as the don of the dons, as Khamenei is, the history of mafia is filled with getting rid of the don of the dons, where the other capos decide he's endangering the whole game.
You know, we saw Foreign Minister Abbas Milani on Fox News downplaying the numbers, calling the protesters rioters, blaming the Mossad and the CIA. Now even Ghalibaf was on CNN, and he was showing the CNN reporter a video of who was clearly security agents of the regime, plainclothes officers, and saying, oh, look, they're not dressed in IRGC commander outfits, therefore this must be foreign agents. And something I've noticed when I go online on social media and I post something, I'm getting attacked by people from particular think tanks, some scholars in universities, and they all have the same messaging, and it seems very coordinated and very orchestrated. Talk to me about that.
I wrote an essay about a year and a half ago. It's called Khamenei's Soft Power in America, where I talk about the influence that they have created in academia, in media, in cyber jihadists. They have a very sophisticated network, and they operate very, as you say, both in a coordinated manner and in a diffuse manner. Somebody sheds doubt about the number of killed. Somebody sheds doubt on who the ones who are killing, doing the killing, was done. Somebody says they're negotiating already with the Americans. Somebody else says they have already an agreement. They have a very coordinated message to dishearten the opposition, disunite the opposition, give the regime more power than it has, and essentially keep the status quo. If you, if you at all have studied how they operate, a few 4 or 5 years ago, the same project that we have at Stanford that did this research on the number of demonstrations, did a research on the networks that the regime has created on the social media. They traced how these people code one another, like one another, refer to one another, reference one another. They create this echo chamber. And the opposition, unfortunately, I think, systematically underestimates the organizational and mendacious nature of this network. The regime is more mendacious and more organized than the opposition often gives them credit. They said they're a bunch of idiots, a bunch of mullahs. No, there are a bunch of mullahs. They are murderous, but they have money, and they have mendacity, and they have determination to keep this remarkable thing that has fallen on their lap, Iran, and hundreds of billions of dollars of money.
Yeah, and I've noticed that even former State Department officials are essentially retweeting what they're saying, or in response to some of my comments, with regards to how futile these negotiations are and what a slap in the face it is to the people of Iran who have been killed in the process. Well, they go, oh, well, we've negotiated with the USSR and China before. What would you say to that?
I was never of the group that said the U.S. should never negotiate with this regime. My position always was, it depends how you negotiate, what you negotiate. You cannot have, there has never been, those who say this, I've checked with a colleague who teaches American history at Stanford. I said, has there ever been a president of the United States who tells people in another country, go take over government buildings? Help is coming. It's never been.
Never.
In 1956, Radio Free Europe invited the communists who were fighting the Communist Party, the people who were fighting the Communist Party. I said the communists because some of the communists were reformists, and some of the people who were not communists, against the Stalinist Communist Party of Hungary. And they said, help is coming. But it wasn't the president of the United States. And after that offer of help coming, news coming out that the regime has now accepted itself 3,000, about 3,000. And we know from the past, whatever the regime accepts, add a multiplier of often 10. So they have accepted this kind of a criminality. Why are you negotiating now? What is the urgency to negotiate now? You have brought these forces. Nobody, the Iranian opposition didn't suggest you bring this armada. You brought this armada there. And now I realize that you want to force them to make concessions. But let's assume they make all the concessions you're asking of them. Let's assume they stop enrichment. Let's assume they promise to stop enrichment. They promise to move the 400 kilos out. They promise to limit the number of ballistic missiles. They've cheated on everything in the past. Why do you think they will not cheat now? There should be a change of this government before there can be a solution to this nuclear problem. A democratic Iran is the only solution to Iran's nuclear problem. A Khamenei who has lied and lied and lied for 40 years, for 35 years, is going to lie again. He knows no other way. He thinks it's his religious duty. Taqiyeh and Khodeh are his religious duties.
How do we get there now, Professor Milani?
Persistence. And, again, persistence in what we can do. What we can do, I speak for myself, I don't speak for anybody else. What I can do is to try to represent the reality of Iran the way I see it. Don't fudge it. Don't pull your punches. And I think it is our job to also be realistic about what this fight is going to take. You have a small minority of mullahs and their dependents, and their aghazadehs and khanumzadehs, who are sitting on several $100 billion of wealth. If there's one thing we know about mullahs, is they're greedy. If one thing we know about the children of the mullahs, they're greedier than their parents. They're not going to give up easy. And you cannot depend on any country, US, Germany, France, any of these countries, to represent the interest of Iran. Iranians can represent the interest of Iran. This is not an easy overnight fight. This is a war. To me, it is absolutely clear that this regime is dead politically. It cannot go on, but it has the capacity to linger on and cause as much trouble as it can. We have to diminish the trouble, try to diminish the amount of killing that they can, and help facilitate transition to a democratic tomorrow. A democratic tomorrow that includes everyone in Iran, people who have been fighting in Iran, the people who have gone to prison in Iran for 40 years, and the Iranian diaspora who have been fighting for democracy and can help solve the incredible abyss that this regime has put the Iranian economy, Iranian society into. It's one of the biggest, most daunting holes I think any new regime is going to face. But that combination, with its richness of reserves, its richness of human capital, natural capital, entrepreneurial capital, can do it, will do it. I'm very, optimistic about Iran's future. I am very grieved and profoundly saddened by the realities of today. Gramsci famously said, I am depressed in my heart, but I'm optimistic in my brain. That's, I think, my way of coping with this calamity.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and brilliant and inspirational advice. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Professor Milani, that we haven't
Thank you very
talked about?
much. قربون شما. خیلی متشکرم.
Bahashini, thank you for your time. Major Andrew Fox, conflict researcher and senior associate fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, and Jake Wallis-Simons, foreign correspondent, columnist, and author of Never Again: How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. You're both co-hosting the podcast The Brink together. Thank you so much for both being here.
No, an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having us.
So we've got U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and even Iran's top security official Ali Larijani, who are expected to hold talks this Friday. I just wanted to start with your reaction, given the moment we're in after tens of thousands of people have been massacred. Andrew, why don't we start with you?
Well, there's a number of possible things this could be. It could be a genuine attempt by the Trump administration to find some kind of pathway to essentially get what they want from Iran without having to go to war. It could be a delaying tactic by maybe both sides, as the Americans get their plans in order for any potential military attack, and the Iranians try and avoid that. So there's a number of possibilities it could be. But the bottom line is it's taking a lot of time. It's taking a lot of effort and energy, and the Iranian people continue to suffer whilst all of this diplomatic maneuvering goes on.
Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think from the Iranian regime's point of view, it's business as usual. We know how they behave when they're under pressure. What they try to do is engage in talks, string the talks out for as long as they possibly can, while secretly advancing their own agenda as much as they can. A lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of sort of smiling faces and nods and smiles, and in the meantime, just trying to advance their own position and shore that up. So that's what they're trying to do. What Trump is trying to do, I think, is much more complicated. My feeling is that the way to read Donald Trump at the moment is that it's in the sweep of American history, in that we had the disastrous intervention of the Vietnam War. Then we had George H.W. Bush with a successful intervention in Kuwait. Then we had the disastrous regime change attempts by George W. Bush in Iraq, and particularly in Afghanistan, which Andrew knows so well, sadly. And now we've got a new era where Trump, he's not an isolationist. So much is clear from his interventions that he's done so far, not least in Venezuela, but also in Iran. But he's also not pro-regime change. He's learned that lesson loud and clear from Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think that what he's trying to do is almost regime taming. And his agenda is not so much wanting to bring democracy around the world. He doesn't see things as, he's not like a human rights guy. He's a foreign policy guy in terms of hard-nosed realpolitik. He wants American interests to be satisfied. And I think that he sees in Venezuela, now it's less aligned with China, Iran, Russia, more aligned with the US, but still a suffering country. That's not his concern. I think with Iran, he's seeking to advance a similar agenda. What he sees in it for him is, it's interesting that his response to the protest was more, let's see if we can do a deal on the nuclear threat. Let's see if we can do a deal for the region in terms of neutering the Iran threat externally, and less, let's see if we can help the protesters. So I think that's how he's seeing things really right now.
Wow. So do you think if the Iranians, being in the weak position that they're in, would hand over some uranium or agree to some sort of deal to go to zero enrichment, do you think he'll take it and that will be the end of it?
I think that it's difficult to imagine Donald Trump backing away from military action completely. I think that the precedent that would set would be potentially a replay of Obama's famous red line in Syria that he failed to implement, and then that led to, perhaps Putin's invasion of Ukraine, of Crimea, the emboldenment of America's enemies. So it's difficult to imagine that Trump does nothing, but I think it's easy to imagine that Trump takes some kind of action which satisfies that threat, but also it doesn't qualify for regime change, allowing him to tame the regime, get some concessions, perhaps if they're desperate enough, on nuclear weapons, perhaps on ballistic missiles and so on, and then back off full action to support the Iranian protesters. So I don't think that's really what Trump wants to do. Now, I do feel, however, that the regime is too fanatical to give up its nuclear ambitions. It really, its whole reason for existence is this millenarian, apocalyptic 313 fighters kind of Mahdi theology. So I don't think it will meet Trump at that position. So I think we will be looking at military action in the end, but I don't think it will be full regime change from an American point of view.
And Andrew, speaking of that, taming the regime, as Jake said, what about something that would lead to a regime collapse, not necessarily regime change, and then the people can take it over from there?
Well, look, there are three levers to pull when it comes to this kind of statecraft. There's the economic lever, the diplomatic lever that we're seeing at the moment, and then there's the military lever as well. And it's about how you apply those three in coordination with each other. So we've seen the pressure that sanctions have placed on the regime in Tehran. That's the economic lever, and that can go on indefinitely. Where we are with diplomacy, I think it's very much a replay in many ways of what happened before the 12-day war, where Trump will fully run out of time and patience, and then will order the military option. And what the military option looks like is what's going to decide whether I think the regime stays in place or not for now. We know how disparate, how dispersed the IRGC is, how the Basij run the country on street corners. It's very difficult to target all of those. If you want to hit them all, it's going to be multi-days, multi-waves, airstrike after airstrike after airstrike, with probably a significant amount of civilian, what we would call collateral deaths. That's not, I don't think, an option that Mr. Trump is keen on. I don't think it's off the table, but I think it would be very much the last resort. And so what we're looking at is a combination of that economic, diplomatic, and military to create a situation whereby the people in Iran will be able to take over in due course.
I wanted to ask, what would the military option look like at this point? And would it have any impact then on collapsing the regime, on making change? Because, we have to keep in mind, Trump did make that promise of, we're locked and loaded. If you shoot, we'll shoot back. Help is on the way. Keep going.
Look, I think that's a different phase of this. That part is over. Trump has already let down the protesters that he encouraged, that he promised to support, and who he told was, to keep going. That's done. That promise is broken. It didn't happen. Now we're into a different stage where we see if there is any help for Iran more generally, but those tens of thousands of protesters are dead now because Trump didn't come in time. So I think we'll have to look at this in two phases. For a military option going forward, it's very difficult to collapse a regime from the air and then see what happens afterwards. And we learned that lesson in Libya. And they're not the same. There are always differences. But the bottom line, if you take out a regime by airstrikes and you don't send ground forces in to stabilize afterwards, you lose a huge degree of control over what comes next. And of course, we know there's as many as 1 million people under arms in Iran who support the regime still. The kind of revolutionary protest side are minimally armed. And so what happens when the regime falls is very, very complicated and could go a number of different ways. So it's a very, very complex thing to try and do if you don't commit your ground forces. And we're not, I don't think, seeing any signs of the Americans being willing to do that, whatever happens. So Mr. Trump has created a situation where he has to do something, and he probably will. But in some ways, he's very much backed into a corner, and he has let down the protesters, whatever happens.
And so, Jake, what do you think is that something that Andrew's talking about?
I think Andrew speaks a lot of sense. If you look throughout history, revolutions themselves don't often end in stable liberal democracies. They more often lead to more authoritarianism, and counter-revolutions, which is basically what this would be, it's a revolution to undo the revolution of 79, have even less track record of success. So history doesn't paint a very positive picture. There's various competing objectives here, I think. From the Israeli point of view, certainly the ballistic missiles would be a priority to get rid of those. It operated for those 12 days in a target-rich environment, didn't get to the end of the list by the time Trump closed the window. The nuclear program as well needs to be fully destroyed if it's not to be rebuilt. We saw satellite images showing some possible attempts for the Iranians at salvaging some material. There were some roofs that went up over some of the nuclear plants, suggesting that some activity was going on there just in the past few days. From the protesters' point of view, I suppose they would want those 11 IRGC headquarters throughout the 31 provinces of Iran taken out, hit, so to give them a bit of breathing space to throw the enemy into disarray. We had on the Brink Kazra Arabi, the well-known Iran analyst, who very vividly mapped out that as a priority for the protesters. Certainly the Ayatollah and his office is a target for Trump, though. I think that it's difficult to imagine any scenario involving military action in which the Ayatollah survives. I think what's quite likely from Trump's point of view, in terms of the agenda that he would like, is a regime that is still unpleasant, hasn't collapsed completely, throwing the country and the region into disarray, but under new leadership that's been tamed by the Americans and that's more compliant and is less of a risk to the Israelis, to American interests and to the region, without a nuclear program, with reduced or eliminated ballistic missile stockpile, and with a more compliant regime. I think that probably is an agenda that Mr. Trump would like to see realized. Does that equate to a free Iran? Does that equate to help for the protesters and a democracy and Reza Pahlavi coming back on a cloud of glory? Probably not. It's not good news for Iran as a whole, but it might neuter the threat, which I think is the wider threat, regional threat, which I think looks like what Mr. Trump's agenda is more likely to be at this point.
So more of a Maduro style, as
Indeed.
they did in Venezuela.
Indeed.
But if they put somebody from within the regime, can that individual be trusted? I mean, the Iranians have shown time and time and again that they will lie.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know what Andrew thinks. I mean, my feeling is that one feature of the Western countries is that we continually underestimate the fanaticism of the Iranian regime. Yes, the regime has people who are in there for the grift. Yes, there are racketeering. Yes, there's gangsterism. Not everybody is an ideologue fanatic, but enough of them are. I mean, as Kazra mentioned on the Brink recently, the IRGC are clerics in uniform. They are much more fanatical than any opposition that the West has faced in a very long time. Now, Trump has been more hard-nosed with regard to the regime. He hasn't been fooled in this and strung along as the Biden administration was. But even he could be persuaded to be convinced that actually there are some less fanatical elements of the regime that might take over and be more pragmatic. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the fanatics are in the driving seat and will remain so even if the Ayatollah is gone. I don't know what Andrew thinks. But it could be that Trump is fooled by pragmatic words from hidden fanatics in the same way as Biden was on a much grander scale during his time in office.
So what do you think, Andrew, especially that you know about the policy in Islamic Republic where you can lie to achieve your goals, and the fact that the IRGC have their fingerprints on pretty much everything in Iran? And even with these talks happening this Friday, I mean, Ali Larijani is going to be there. He's connected to the IRGC. He's one of the masterminds behind the massacre, in fact.
Yeah, and that's why this is so difficult. It's why there is no obvious, easy, quick solution that presents us when we look at the military side of things. And you know, just as Hamas in Gaza have managed to engineer their survival so far, they know that there is a ticking clock with Donald Trump, and it's a 3-year ticking clock. Like, he won't be in the White House forever. So all they have to do is play nice whilst Mr. Trump is still around, and then reassess the political terrain once the next presidential election has a result, and we know who the next president is, because certainly a Democrat president is likely to be played in the same way that Biden was, in the same way that Obama was. And the Republican replacements are certainly looking even more isolationist than Trump, especially if it's J.D. Vance. So everything changes in 3 years' time anyway, and these regimes, these organizations have the advantage that they don't think in electoral cycles when it comes to their own plans. All they have to do is think in generations. They can have long-term plans, and they can have a hudna for as long as they want to rebuild their strength. You know, hudna being the Islamic term for a sort of ceasefire where you regather your strength. You know, they can do that for as long as they need, and they can still keep their religious goal in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And we really have to understand that psychology when we're dealing with these people. They're not like the Venezuelan crime cartel, who will happily do a one-place change. They'll get rid of the person in charge, replace them with the number two, and the number two will play nice because they don't want the same thing to happen to them. It's not the same as Venezuela. And my concern is that Mr. Trump, thinking of everything as a transaction, hasn't quite appreciated that nuance, because we're seeing Qatar, Turkey, Hamas playing him for a fool in Gaza. I suspect the Iranian regime will try and do the same.
I mean, I would only just add to that Trump's campaign website is selling Trump 2028 rewrite the rules merch, and by the rules it means the US Constitution. So it looks like there are some signals that we might be looking at another Trump term despite the Constitution, whatever the Iranians are hoping for.
Oh, that's a very significant point, definitely. And does this risk normalizing the Islamic Republic to a certain extent? I mean, I know that the Americans, have met with whatever the USSR and China when they've committed severe human rights abuses, but I think we've moved beyond that. I mean, I spoke to Dr. Payam Akhavan, who's a former UN prosecutor. He is an expert in genocide, and he calls this an extermination, something that we've never seen in the scale of Iran's modern history, from modern history in general. Um, so when you see an extermination, as he's labeled it, does this not risk normalizing that kind of behavior? I think we've moved beyond severe human rights abuses here.
Yeah, the massacres, the scale of the massacres we've seen in Iran in recent weeks really have recalled the 20th century, I think. It's recalled Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. That's the scale of the slaughter and butchery that is being carried out on the streets of Iran, in just the same way as the Soviet Union has used, for example, and the other dictatorships I've mentioned. There is a danger that the regime could be normalized if Trump's transactional attitude, as Andrew describes it, leads to a deal, the art of the deal, that leaves them much more neutered with respect to the region and the Americans, but still in control of the protesters and still with the ability to gun them down if they are to seek to advance their own freedom as they deserve. That is a really real risk, I think. I mean, either way, I think in the longer run, maybe in the medium term, in the next few weeks, couple of months, the Iranian regime is going to emerge broken. But will it be intact or not? I think it's likely, unfortunately, that it will still be intact.
And a question for you both. I mean, with the 12-day war, at the time, we didn't see protests, but I do feel in many ways what we saw in January was a result of what Israel and the United States did in Iran, because it really did weaken the regime. And when Israel was able to take over Iran's airspace, a lot of Iranians who were out protesting said, that they felt the regime wasn't as strong as they thought it was, and it gave them the courage to go out in the street. So if we do see more military strikes, like you mentioned, Kasra Arabi from United Against Nuclear Iran, pointing out the different IRGC centers, etc., or even taking out someone like Khamenei, couldn't that then lead to some sort of revolutionary change? Are the elements not in place there right now? Andrew, I'll start with you, and then Jake.
That's the ideal outcome, quite frankly, is that there's enough military action from the Americans that it creates the opportunity for internal regime change. That's the dream outcome in many ways, because it kind of answers a lot of those questions that I flagged up earlier about who runs the place once the regime is gone. So that would be ideal. That it's difficult because, as I said, there are so many security personnel that are attached to the regime, and they will retain a degree of mass to be able to put down protests. So that's the first hurdle to jump over. I think what that looks like is making sure that arms get into the country for the protesters, if we're really going down that route. Then we have to consider, where the regime sits once the bombs have stopped falling. Is there somebody that can kind of seize the reins? Is there somebody that can, give the protesters enough that they feel that their challenges have been answered? Because, yes, the 12-day war was one of the catalysts for this. The other was a lack of water. The other was huge inflation. There's a kind of perfect storm of factors that have gone into this. And if there's somebody who steps over and takes over from Khamenei, who can reassure people that actually this is going to be okay going forward, then that might be a slightly different dynamic. So, yeah, as I said earlier, there's just a number of different factors that play into this that make it incredibly hard to predict what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that when it comes to the possible success of the protest, we need to recognize that what we're talking about is military force, not in terms of, external military force we've talked about, but internal military force used against unarmed protesters. That's the obstacle that the protesters have got. Yes, they are fragmented, haven't had a single coherent whole and a leader to rally behind. Recently, it seems like Reza Pahlavi is emerging more and more as this unifying figure that the protest movement has lacked traditionally in recent years. But still, you've got people who are not armed. Not only they're not armed, but they're not trained to use arms. If you were to ship in a whole load of AK-47s and hand them out to the 17-year-olds on the street, they would probably shoot each other because they don't know how to use those arms. So what we're really looking for, the deciding factor would need to be, in terms of the hard power power. You've got a regime that isn't going to, see protesters threading roses into its gun barrels and put them down and join the protesters. But what we could see is some kind of defections. That's the only thing that's going to change the balance of power on the streets of Iran. If there were some elements of the army, for example, I know Reza Pahlavi has tried to appeal to the army to defect, the less fanatical elements, the less sort of brainwashed parts of the IRGC, who were able to take the side of the protesters and turn arms against the regime, then you'd be looking at something more akin to a civil war. But it's notable that there has not been any sign of that so far. And without that, you're going to see brave protesters taking to the streets, young people being mown down and butchered. I mean, I saw a video of a school teacher weeping in his classroom because his entire class had been massacred on the streets. I mean, that's what we're going to see. The regime will not stop. It needs to be forced to stop. But how's that going to happen? I mean, that's a really big question.
And speaking of that, does the responsibility to protect kick in here?
Well, I think RTP has potentially had its day. I think there's been a number of instances around the world where that could have been used in the past 10 years and wasn't. I think Libya was the last one. I think Libya was the nail in the RTP coffin, quite frankly. And look, for that, you would need a UN Security Council resolution. I don't see Russia or China letting that pass the UN Security Council, which really leaves us back at square one. So, RTP had its heyday in the 90s, a brief flash in the early zeros, and I think that's now probably consigned to the dustbin of history.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what we've been talking about is Trump's world now. The international rules-based order, if you believed in it, has definitely gone now. We're living in a much more, to use Andrew's word, transactional age. President Trump is a president who is able to flex and use American power in a way that Joe Biden just didn't. Trump has shown a power of deterrence when he wants to use it, perhaps not against Vladimir Putin, but against some other bad actors around the world. But the equation of foreign policy now is much more transactional. It's much more about the self-interest of the country. It's not so much about trying to protect human rights and protect those brave protesters who are giving their lives on the streets of Iran.
Well, then why do you suppose he put out those messages?
Do you know what? I think it's social media presidency again. I think he saw something on the TV, jumped on Truth Social, blasted out a message without thinking it through. And yet again, I think he just governs in the moment. It's not planning, it's not thought through. And I think his military will have gone to him and gone, hey, okay, but it's going to take a few weeks because we don't have an aircraft carrier because you moved it because you wanted to do the Venezuela operation. Genuinely, I think that's what it is. He's shot from the hip and it's backfired.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean, I you could be right. I think that he saw or sensed an opportunity there. He knows that Iran is part of the axis of authoritarianism that he's been trying to dismantle with Venezuela and so on. He knows that there's unfinished business in Iran with regard to the ballistic missiles, the nuclear missiles, and so on. He sees the regime weakened by those protests, and he sees those protesters as potentially another element of leverage for him to advance his own agenda. He didn't, I mean, as Andrew correctly pointed out, he didn't probably have a laid out strategy, an idea in mind how he would get to his goal, but his animal instincts were raised, I think, and he saw that there's something I can work with here. There's some leverage here. There's opportunity for America to advance our own needs and agenda and wishes here. And I think that's probably what led to that weird, declaration of intent without a thought through strategy yet. But we're seeing that unfold. And I think that he's going to want to secure some of his own objectives, really, above all in this opportunity.
You said two very crucial things here. Number one, leverage of the protesters. Does that mean that he used the protesters for his own means? And what are the opportunities here for the U.S.?
Well, I mean, yes, I think you could say it that way. I mean, certainly it was astonishing how Trump had the audacity to encourage tens of thousands of protesters to continue taking to the streets in the hope of American intervention, perhaps knowing or not feeling obliged to bring that intervention quickly. I mean, to say there's blood on his hands, I mean, you could make an argument for that, for sure. And if I was an Iranian father who had lost my teenage son to the regime's bullets, who'd gone out there encouraged by President Trump's promise of quick action, I would feel pretty bitter right now, to say the least. But to say he's using them, I think that, he definitely is a president who supports the ideal of freedom. But as Andrew says, there's also the competing agenda of transactionalism, of how to advance the agenda of the free world through a combination of military force and leverage. His main concern isn't with the lives of the protesters, I think. It's with having an Iran that is more easy to deal with in terms of America's foreign policy agendas.
What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think he has firmly let down that first tranche, and really, I think the way history will judge this is what happens next. And I think this is now in the wind. If he comes away with a deal that he can trumpet that looks like the Greenland deal, the non-deal that he came away from Davos with, but he can put it on social media that he's resolved the problem and isn't he great, and his followers will go with it, then I think that's an option he might take. I certainly think if that doesn't come off, I think there will be military action of some kind. But again, it'll need to be something that he can present as a win in this transaction. It needs to be seen that Donald Trump came out on top. Venezuela's the perfect operation for him. In, out, quick, done. Thank you very much. Look how great my country has done. Thank you. The last thing I think he will want to do is that long, protracted campaign. But he might be forced to. If it shows that the mullahs are absolutely unwilling to bend, that might well be, that regime change from the sky 4 to 5 days going forward. So all of these things are on the table. We've seen a degree of betrayal already, but where we go next, it could go from very, very soft to very, very hard power and everything in between.
So what is a win then? I mean, if the Americans say zero enrichment, as you said, the Iranians would most likely say no to that. That's both their red lines. That's going to lead to conflict. What would a win be here then?
Well, I mean, from the American point of view, it's going to be, those demands that Trump has made are demands that the Ayatollah is never going to agree to. I mean, he would be deposed by his own fanatics if he were to sign up to those. And yet that's what the Americans are demanding. And they would be willing to take military action in order to get a more pliant leader who would be able to sign up to those things. That's what the Americans want. But I think that the important thing to remember from Trump's point of view, he's not thinking in terms of the individual protesters, in terms of the tens of thousands of protesters. He's not even really thinking about Iran. He's thinking about the bigger picture, I think, which is that you've got China as the center of gravity of the main opposing pole to American power. You've got Russia as the junior partner in that. Then you've got Iran. Then you've got Venezuela. And he's always trying to maneuver a way to fragment that alliance and advance the American agenda, with the caveat that he's pretty pro-Putin. I mean, that's the part that isn't quite aligned with that. But either way, he's always disrupting, he's deterring, he's ducking and diving and weaving. What he says is often a sort of almost like a disinformation campaign. I mean, did he really intend to take Greenland, or was he saying that just to make the Europeans talk about that and take their eyes off what he was doing with Iran or with Putin? Everything that he puts out on Truth Social a lot of the time is what Steve Bannon calls flooding the zone. It's distraction. It's taking people's eyes off what he's really trying to do. None of this really is very reassuring for the Iranian protesters and the Iranian people. That's the great tragedy of this. We're not seeing a kind of moral foreign policy in the way that the Iranian protesters and activists would like to see. What we are seeing is a power play of a bigger picture, and Iran fits Trump's overall game of chess, I think, global chess, in that way.
And things could change quite easily if Iran were to do a preemptive strike on Israel. Do you think that that's potentially in the cards, or are they so weak right now that they don't have the capabilities?
I don't think that's that stupid. I think is probably where we're going with this. They know that Israel is probably going to stay out of this. If it goes ahead, it's probably going to be American-led and American only. The US Navy does not need assistance from the Israelis. Israel have a very capable air force, but it's a very, very long way to fly to Iran when you've got an aircraft carrier right on the doorstep. So at the moment, the Israelis aren't getting involved. The second Iran opens fire first on Tel Aviv, all bets are off at that point. And then we are looking at that multi-day, multi-wave, guaranteed removal of everything to do with the Iranian regime's infrastructure. So it would be a particularly foolish thing to do.
They're fanatical. Do you see that?
Only if it's a Parthian shot, I think. Sorry, Jake, mate. Well,
I was about to say the same thing as you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's if only in the case that the regime is about to fall, and so what they do is fire everything as a Parthian shot to try and take down as much of the Gulf and as much of Israel as they can with them. That's the only real situation I can envisage this one occurring.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget that the ideology of the Iranian regime, the Mahdiism, is apocalyptic. What they want, what they think, what they believe will happen is an apocalyptic war triggered by the destruction of the Jews and war with Israel that will then draw the whole world into it. Then the Mahdi will return, then he'll have his 313 generals and so on and so forth. And so you can imagine that if they see that the writing's on the wall for them, they could think, right, now's the moment of the apocalypse. Let's fire everything off at everybody and come on, Mahdi, come and save us. You can imagine, I mean, I'm laughing, but it's not funny, but you can imagine that actually that's what guides their foreign policy. They're not normal. They're not normal authoritarians. They're not normal dictators. They are religious fanatics. That's their primary characteristic.
So I just wanted to end things off with this information war that I've been seeing online, where a lot of people within the Iranian regime kind of influence network are painting this as, any kind of foreign intervention is bad. And, the Iranians are stuck in the middle between their own repressive government and potentially foreign intervention. And that a lot of what we're seeing is A, by rioters, and B, again, foreign intervention. Most likely they're referring to the Mossad and CIA. What do you guys make of that?
Um, Look, we're already seeing the early stages of this information warfare playing out over our phones as we speak. We know Iran has a very sophisticated and very well-resourced international influence arm, and they will absolutely be trying to take pages out of the playbook that we've seen for the last 2.5 years by painting themselves as innocent victims of international aggression from the West, and of course, by implication, from Israel as well. So that is the paradigm that they will be trying to push. And actually, in many ways, the delay that we've seen from protests to now to military action has actually helped them with that slightly. Because if it happened during the protests, that's much harder to spin. Now there's been a bit of a pause. They can say, "Hey, look, we tried to negotiate, but the Americans wouldn't have it." So that's the direction they're going. It'll be combined with threats, and actually, the corollary to the information stuff is my concern about the response on Western streets and what they have the ability to generate in London, in Paris, in Brussels, in Washington. Whether they can not only generate protests, as we saw in London last Saturday, we saw regime flags being waved in the streets of London. But also, is there any violence and any kind of terrorist related activity they can generate here to kind of have a degree of retribution or control over the situation? So the information and the subversive are very closely connected, and we're going to have to be good, because look, information campaigns are irrelevant if you don't have some sort of output from them. Like, if you just say a bunch of bad things about your opponent, you've achieved nothing. If you say bad things and you can generate action from that, that's what you're looking for in an information campaign. So it's that bit that we really have to watch out for and counteract.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The thing that the Iranians understand is that there's a lot of people in the West who only see the world through the prism of how it reflects their own ideology, their own actually anti-Western liberal ideology. So when they look at Iran, what they see is an enemy of Israel, and that's a good thing. Because Israel is a representative of Western capitalism, Western colonialism, I suppose they would put it, Western white supremacy, Western racism. And so they they instinctively support the Iranian regime because it opposes in their narcissistic worldview, opposes all the things that they think are wrong with their own society, that they're trying to campaign against. That's how they see these things, the whole world. And so these people are exploited by actual signed up jihadis or Iranian Shia fanatics. And we saw that, as Andrew said, on the streets of London, where we had Hezbollah knickknacks being sold by the side of the road. We had jihadi We had jihadis openly performing the Nazi salute, the Sieg Heil, which of course is adopted by Hezbollah. We had Iranians flying the regime flag, mustering outside the Ayatollah's London office, marching with the Iranian flag, regime flag, alongside the Palestinian flag, and praising the Ayatollah, even holding placards with a picture of the Ayatollah with the slogan, "The right side of history." And it's the Western idiots who think that all of this stuff is anti-racist that swell the numbers of these hardcore jihadis and terrorists, and act as the numerous sort of foot soldiers who hold the battering ram of jihad and thrust it into the gates of Western civilization. That's what we're facing. And the Iranians know that. They know how stupid the Western left is. And they know exactly how to exploit them simply by allying their own murderous fanatical regime with the cause of Palestine. That's what they're trying to do. That's what we have to contend with in the West as well as the Iranians. And that's why it's so important that decent Western people who haven't had their head turned by this propaganda, the few of us that remain, need to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian people. Excuse me. Sorry, I just came to a crescendo and let myself down. Need to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Iranian people in standing against this information warfare, because it's going to bring us all down together.
Yeah, and to that point, on the day of the uprisings on January 8th, the entire day, Iranian state TV was playing Tucker Carlson. I mean,
Right.
what does that tell you, right? And I think that the uprising itself is spinning the Western liberal world upside down, because everything that's part of this uprising goes against what they think we are and how they see us, and they put us in this anti-imperialist box, right? Pro-American. A lot of them like Trump. A lot of them like Netanyahu. A lot of them are very pro-Israel inside Iran. I'm not talking about just the diaspora, inside Iran itself. And this is confusing a lot of Westerners. And I think maybe that's why I haven't seen a lot of Western people, hashtag save Iran or free Iran. I don't see any of that coming from them.
Yeah, they're just confused. They're like, could it be that we were wrong from the beginning? Oh, no. It's got to be that the world's wrong.
Exactly.
Cognitive distance is a really powerful thing. And also, I think it's difficult to underestimate how ignorant most people are about the Middle East. They really, a lot of people really only got interested in it on 7th of October. And they got interested on the Palestinian side, not the side of Israel, who'd been on the wrong end of a massacre. And they're learning as they go, bless their hearts. So as they suddenly reach the conclusion that perhaps the regime in Iran isn't very nice, even though they oppose Israel, as Jake said, it becomes incredibly difficult to hold those two conflicting ideas in your head at the same time. And so the easy thing to do is to dismiss the new idea, which is the one that the protesters in Iran are actually worth supporting.
And a lot of protesters in Iran are desperate, are begging for some form of foreign intervention here because they need help. So what would you say to those people who come up online and say, oh, well, any form of foreign intervention is bad?
Well, I mean, they're just as repulsive as the people who support Hamas with a nudge and a wink. The River to the Sea people, the Globalize the Intifada people, even the Free Palestine people. When you dig down and ask them for their views on Hamas, they're not that bothered. They hate themselves much more than they hate Hamas. That's what it boils down to. They hate their own countries, the West, their own the democratic values that gave them the freedom that they're enjoying to criticize it. That's what they really hate. Their minds have been twisted by generations of propaganda from the Cold War onwards, from race propaganda, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. They're being manipulated by very well-funded, often state-sponsored disinformation campaigns that have been going on for decades and have monopolized the UN, monopolized the mainstream media, monopolized the NGO complex, and so on and so forth. So they really are victims of the West eating itself, and Iran is getting chewed up in the process. So what I would say to them is I'm not even sure I have words. I mean, these are the people who are the useful idiots who are bringing about or seeking to bring about the destruction of everything that is freedom-loving in the world, both in Iran and in the West. And they need to be educated and certainly silenced when they try to play with the big boys.
Well, thank you so much, you both, for your time. And I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Dr. Homa Fati and Dr. Panteha Rezaian, thank you both for being here. You're both part of the ADA Health Alliance, which is a coalition of diaspora physicians documenting the targeting of medical professionals inside Iran. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
This is a very important topic, and what you and your coalition are doing is incredibly important at a time like this. So, Shah newspaper, which is for those who don't know, is a reformist newspaper from Iran, reports that at least 25 doctors have been arrested since the January uprising simply for treating wounded protesters. And keep in mind, this is a newspaper from inside Iran, so I'm sure that the numbers, unfortunately, are much higher than that. What are you hearing about the targeting of doctors inside Iran right now? Dr. Rezaian, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having us, and thank you for shedding the light to very important situation right now in Iran, and not only for the people, actually, even for the healthcare providers. So yes, actually, the number is much higher than that. Homadun is one of the key person working on that list, and unfortunately, this list is longer. And then, unfortunately, some of the names not been released yet for different reasons. Number one, the family afraid of just releasing the name, and then the rest of the family or even the doctor or healthcare provider be jeopardized because they are threatening people. If you are releasing the information to the media, the rest of the family and also your own loved one will be at risk. So that's number one. Number two is just because those people that the name has been out, and then we try to shed the light. Still, we learned that we have been able to help some of them, but unfortunately, many of them still, especially those that are unknown and the name not being out, is at the imminent risk of torture, and even they might sentence them to death. Hopefully not, but
we've been seeing reports of some doctors have been charged with crimes that are punishable by death.
Exactly. And then is very horrible, because what we are doing as a physician, we are under oath, right? So as soon as any doctor being graduated, we need to take an oath, and that's what we have to do. It doesn't matter who is the patient, we have to do it. We need to help them, and that's our job duty. But unfortunately, it sounds that is not acceptable by the government of Iran. And we actually have some of the doctors has been injured and killed during that protest.
Dr. Fati, tell us more about this list that you're putting together.
The list that I'm putting together so far has 43 on it. It is not just doctors, it is also medical students, nurses, technicians, like operating room technicians, and any healthcare worker that helps throughout the hospital and outside. The list is also has also a separate part for those who were killed. The majority of healthcare professionals who have been arrested due to helping people who were injured. Like they either protested the presence of plainclothes and security forces inside the hospitals, or they had an argument with them over taking the bodies of the dead outside without surrendering them to the family, or taking the injured from the bed before the medical procedure finishes. In some cities, there has been heavy presence of IRGC forces and other security forces in the hospitals, whereas in some other cities it hasn't been so heavy, but the pattern is very similar. If you're helping the protesters, we're going to arrest you. And in some cases, doctors have been arrested because they refuse to discharge a patient in need in favor of an IRGC member who needed medical help. So the order is clear. You get to only help the IRGC forces.
Wow. Dr. Fati, is there a story in particular that you are safe to share with us of a particular person?
I have unfortunately more than one story. In one of the hospitals in southwest Iran, there was an older adult lady. The healthcare worker that talked to me estimated there were 300 pellet bullets in his waist, in the back of her body, in her shin and thighs, and they had to dismiss her in favor of an IRGC force. In northeast Iran, there was a lot of burn patients, I would say, among the security forces. They shot tear gas into the emergency department. Their goal was to scare the patients that were in the emergency department to empty the beds because they wanted to take over the beds for themselves. There was one of the security forces that was going around the hospital taking pictures of the faces of every single person that was injured, or that one of the doctors approached him, said, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And that doctor was arrested in 2 days and right now is facing a ban on his medical degree and for his ability to practice.
My
Also,
God, these are awful.
there is another story in northwest Iran. A medical intern was directly shot in the hospital for protesting the presence. So I am collecting more information on that right now, but there are all sorts of stories out there that are confirmed that we have personally directly been in touch with healthcare professionals, students, nurses, physicians, all of the healthcare professionals who are desperate to get their voice out there and to receive any form of help that they can from international organizations that are responsible and do advocacy for safety of healthcare professionals and healthcare facilities.
And Dr. Fati, just to add to that, what is the message then that these healthcare professionals want to get out to the rest of the world?
I think first one is giving the Iranian victims credibility. This is a protest against the regime and the government of Iran, and people who came to the hospitals are not rioters. They're protesters. A lot of them were protesting for their freedom of speech, for to show that they do not agree with the political system that is taking over Iran. So they're not rioters. Second, they have been denied safe access to care. In one case, there were 5 snipers put on top of a hospital to shoot the injured as they approached the hospital. So by no means there is safe access to healthcare forces, to healthcare facilities in Iran. And the problem right now is that we are facing an epidemic of infected wounds, pellet gun wounds, and any other broken bones. These people cannot go to the hospitals because despite their best efforts, healthcare professionals cannot protect their identities. And once taken by the security and IRGC forces, there is a likelihood that they're just going to die. They're just going to let them die in the prisons and in detentions. So the message is health should be there in every possible way. Safe access to healthcare facilities must be advocated, and health safety of healthcare professionals must be guaranteed. And international organizations should pressure Islamic Republic to provide this kind of safety. We have had cases of surgeons being tailed outside the hospitals so that the security forces make sure they're not going to do home visits. This must end. Any human being deserves safe access to care when needed, especially under so heartbreaking circumstances after this massacre.
Dr. Rezayan, can you tell us more about this epidemic that Dr. Fati was talking about?
Yeah, actually, I'm one of the doctors along with the other doctors in the capacity of the IFA, which is the one of the groups part of the IDA Health Alliance. We made a virtual clinic, and we are trying to help the virtually help the people inside the Iran, obviously. And the number of the infected wound, either just the shotgun or just the plate gun wounds, is very, very high. It's just the prevalence is getting even worse. Some of the patients, not as the Homadun said, some of them are not even able to go to make any X-ray or medical treatment in any kind of the medical facility because they're afraid being arrested, getting torture, or even killed in that facility because the IRGC people that were there. And number one. Number two, they're, staying home. What's happened when the patient with the bullet wound stay at home? They're not medical people, right? So they don't know what they're doing. So they might get infected. Unfortunately, some of the people are trying to remove some of those bullets, and because they're not medical professional, they're making more damage. And unfortunately, we have many cases actually, because of the infection, they unfortunately passed away because of the severity, and then still they denied to go to the medical facility. And just imagine how big it would be, the fear that if you're going to the hospital and you will be arrested by the government, and they still prefer to stay home and die, not going, risk their life in that way. So my point is that, as Dr. Fatih mentioned, that type of the approach and procedure from the government of Iran should be stopped immediately, and we cannot do it without the help of the international humanitarian societies and organizations. So we need the help. Is not a localized issue, is not a issue only limited to the people of Iran, is the humanitarian condition, and everybody needs to understand if they're not helping us, one day those governments might attack them. They did that many times. So it's not a very national issue. It is an international crime, needs to be stopped right now.
Yes, it is an international crime. And I wanted to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Dr. Rezayan, and then we'll get to you right after, Dr. Fatih, is that, to be honest, I've been getting into arguments with a lot of people online because the talks are set to take place this Friday between the Iranian regime and the Americans in Turkey and Istanbul. And, I've been tweeting about that, for example, on X, and some people in think tanks and whatnot and have been saying, oh, well, what's your alternative? This is a good thing that they're meeting. Negotiations is a good thing. And I said, well, listen, tens of thousands of people didn't die for a better nuclear deal of some sort. What is your response as medical professionals who are asking for international help? What is your response to something like that?
So obviously, as a person that kind of the representative of my group, which is the, is nonpartisan group, and I'm not going to explain my personal political view about that, but something about, international humanitarian law. If the government making a crime doesn't change if they are making a good deal or bad deal about the one thing. The crime is the crime, and it's the government that can do that to their own people. They definitely can do it to the other, especially when they already announced that they want to convert the other countries to what they believe is believers, or they already threatened the many other countries, and they did so many things to other peoples. So I think the history just talk itself. So if they did it something like this before, making a deal does not change the face of the crime, and they will do it again. So if they're not stopping them, it happened again, unfortunately. And one of the things I want to shed the light on it is the life of the prisoners is in imminent danger. We are talking about the people, they have no help, they are helpless, they are inside the prison, and any minutes they are, execute them. And they do not need any trial. They're not putting any trial. Many of them just, they decide, okay, tomorrow you're done, and that's it. So we have 100. I mean, I don't have the specific number of the political prisoners, but it is many. I mean, 10,000s of the political prisoners inside, and non-political prisoners actually inside the prisons of Iran, and they will do whatever they can to bring the fear and scare to the people of Iran, to stop them, to make them silent. So please be aware of what's going on over there. And then if you're not acting now, the blood of those people is on their hands. So,
Dr. Fati?
Oh, I would say one thing that I could say for sure is that no negotiation would be cherished and appreciated by people of Iran, because to people of Iran, the Islamic Republic does not have any legitimacy. Also, the Islamic Republic has proven over and over it does not respect any sort of promises that it makes in these international negotiations. A recent example is when President Trump announced on his social media, I guess, truce, that the Islamic Republic has promised them not to execute people. And we had like 10 people executed the day after. I don't know if they are aware of these controversies and these differences, or they just pretend. I have no idea. But the one thing that is for sure is that Islamic Republic does not guarantee the safety of people who are injured, who are in the hospitals, who are in the detention centers or prisons. People are going to be executed, and executions are most likely going to take place without a juridical system proceeding that is fair. So I would say that to me, my main concern is humanitarian help that we could get. But I would say that negotiations with Islamic Republic at this point are completely are a joke. How can I say it? It's just a play pretend on the international level so that they could come back to massacre, to kill people. So this is not something that people would cherish. This is not the kind of help that people are looking for. And that's definitely, I can say that wholeheartedly.
Yes, no, for sure. And Dr. Rezayan, I wanted to talk to you to shift the conversation towards the doctors again about the arrest and abduction of doctors from hospitals who are treating protesters. What do you know so far?
yeah, actually, I just 30 minutes before our interview started, I learned about one of our actually friends who has been be the voice of the Iranian and then healthcare providers has been and, has been not arrested yet, but they showed up at the work and they said, okay, enough is enough. You're not going to talk about those things anymore, and that's a last last notice. And if it happened one more time, you will see what's going to happen to you, similar to what happened to your, colleagues. So it's just the most recent news I learned from one of the doctors I personally know. And as Dr. Patty mentioned, exactly the same stories I have been learned about that is I learned that some of the doctors has been chased to make sure they're not going to help the protester or injured people at home. They has been chased to their own home when they made a small little kind of the home clinic to help the people. Actually, one doctor's and then also his wife, they're helping the people inside their own mm, uh, the garage, and they made a home clinic, and unfortunately they attacked them, and they um they took them away, and then they're right now under the procedures, all of those things. It's very sad, and unfortunately not stopped. And it's not only them, they try to silence even the people outside of the Iran. So that's another thing. If you are making a deal with the criminal, a liar who has been repeatedly shown that is not trustworthy, what would you expect? So yes, we have unfortunately many stories regarding the doctors and healthcare providers, not only the doctors, the healthcare providers. They try to help. We had the medical student, a 50-year medical student that was trying to help the the other, injured people, and unfortunately has been arrested. And you remember during the woman life freedom movement, many of the doctors, including Dr. Aida Rostami, which the Aida Alliance has been named after her. She has been actually tortured and beaten to death. So and many other doctors. So what they did at that time, they unfortunately continue to doing it again and again and again, and they will continue until we stop them forever.
Yeah, that's a horrific story of Dr. Aida Rostami. I remember reading the details of that torture, that they even gouged her eyes. Just absolutely horrific, and all for, like you said, living up to her oath and helping people. Just awful. And Dr. Fati, just to close, we've been seeing a lot of images from the morgues of protesters that still have their catheters in place. What does that tell you?
That aligns very well with the reports that I have received from healthcare professionals across Iran, that IRGC forces, Basij forces, and plainclothes forces just raided the hospital, took the patients out as they were receiving medical care, either to open the space for IRGC forces that needed the help, or just to take them away. It does not surprise me, and unfortunately, I have a story that while one of them was being taken away to be put among the dead, from inside the bag, they heard a voice saying, "I'm still alive, I'm still alive." And that certain person was separated from the dead. I can only assume to be taken without medical care that might actually end up killing him. But it also shows you that if someone is unconscious momentarily, or if someone cannot talk at the moment, very easily they could be taken among the dead just because they were not conscious. So taking the bodies, the injured from hospital beds is very well documented and supported by healthcare professionals.
And is there any closing remarks that you both wanted to end off with?
I would like to say that the case of arresting healthcare professionals, particularly by raiding the hospital, in these cases, usually people who are on the lower ranks in the medical team have lesser voice. Like, for instance, if a surgeon and 3 nurses have been arrested, usually we're well aware of the name of the surgeon and we could advocate for them. But there's an intersectionality here, in the sense that if the personnel is nurse or an operating room technician, there is less likelihood that we are well aware of the circumstances of those healthcare forces, which by no means have less importance in what they have done to serve people. So I want to shed light on that and say that everyone who has tried to help the injured counts as part of the healthcare team now, and the lives of these people are as valued, and we have to advocate for all of them.
And I would like to add to what Dr. Fati said. The number of the toll that is still not exactly clear. We don't know, and that number has been deliberately obscured by the government of Iran and all of those internet shutdown. But the problem is not only the numbers of the death toll at that night, that few nights of the protest. Actually, the number of the people right now at home and they're at risk of the infection and unfortunately imminent death because of that is increasing. And then we need to also consider those numbers as a part of that death toll. Also, the number of the people right now, we have several reports that the people has been released from the detention or just the prison, and few days after they will die. It's very suspicious. There is no really underlying condition or something that explain that immediate death. So this is one of those things that the many doctors are working on, that to bring more information and understand what's going on, because it's more than one or two or few cases. It has been high number enough to concern us about a pattern that has been seen. So that's another thing that we need to pay attention to that. And one more time, every human being, has deserved to have a medical care, and that's our job as a medical professional to help them. And we will continue what we are doing to help the people. They cannot stop us.
Thank you so much, both of you and your organization, for all the courageous work that you do. Well, if you like this episode, you can hit the like button and let us know what you think. You can also sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. And you can also check out our dedicated English website at iranintl.com/en.